Imagine you're trying to pull millions of people out of poverty, but at the exact same time, you're getting hammered by the devastating real-time impacts of global climate change. It's a massive puzzle, right? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a major geopolitical and environmental pivot. We're looking at India's strategic climate policy recalibration. Essentially, this is a decisive shift away from top-down global mitigation mandates, moving straight toward immediate localized adaptation. So let's jump right in and decode exactly how a rapidly developing nation balances explosive economic growth with actual survival. Here's our game plan for today. We'll cover the climate strategy shift, adaptation versus mitigation, drivers of policy recalibration, India's 8 core missions, grassroots impact and resilience, and finally, a strategic recap and analysis. Number 1, the climate strategy shift, balancing growth and global crises. So how exactly does a developing nation fight climate change without totally slamming the brakes on its own economic growth? That's the absolute crucial question driving this evolving policy. Historically, environmental action and industrialization have been treated like enemies. But in this new strategic framework, securing a prosperous economic future isn't seen as a distraction from climate action at all. Instead, rapid economic growth is basically viewed as the ultimate shield to survive climate impacts. The bigger picture here is a complete paradigm shift. Now, to be clear, this is not a retreat from climate commitments, it's a massive redirection of energy. The realization is that rapid industrialization generates the actual wealth and tech you need for deep decarbonization later on. You literally have to build the economic engine first so you can actually afford to pay for the clean energy transition down the road. Number 2, adaptation versus mitigation, building mental models. We hear these two words thrown around constantly, but let's separate them because it's absolutely crucial for understanding global climate action. Think of mitigation as an attempt to cool down the entire planet by reducing greenhouse gases. It requires total global cooperation, and frankly, it takes decades to actually move the needle on temperatures. Adaptation, on the other hand, is intensely local and it's immediate. It's altering our systems right now to protect ourselves today. If mitigation is trying to put out a forest fire stretching across the entire globe, adaptation is building a fireproof house for your family right now so you can survive the heat. To put that into perspective, let's look at how this plays out on the ground. Mitigation involves these massive, slow-moving systemic shifts, things like transitioning entirely to low-carbon energy or building huge carbon capture plants. Adaptation, though, offers direct, tangible benefits right this second. It means pouring concrete for sea-level defenses, reinforcing bridges so they don't wash away in flash floods, and changing the types of seeds farmers are planting so crops don't just completely fail during a drought. And there's this quote from the Economic Survey 2025 that really hits the nail on the head. It states that rich and developed countries should do the mitigation work, while developing countries focus on adaptation. It's a bold stance. The argument here is that mitigation requires global financial cooperation that is, well, currently faltering. Because that global system isn't delivering, developing nations are forced to prioritize their own immediate survival. They have to adapt, while essentially demanding that wealthy, industrialized nations pick up the heavy lifting for mitigation. Number 3, drivers of policy recalibration, the why behind the shift. So what actually triggered this massive change in game plan? Well, it's a domino effect. Step 1, we see broken global promises. Developed nations are failing to meet their emissions targets and falling way short on climate finance. Step 2, global momentum takes a huge hit with the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement in 2025. And step 3, facing this totally unreliable global landscape, India demands absolute strategic autonomy. The country insists on a flexible, domestic-driven energy transition rather than just waiting around for top-down international mandates. And the whole strategy centers around one incredibly specific number, 2047. Achieving developed country status by 2047 takes absolute priority. The strategic calculation here is pretty straightforward. The country can only afford to fully transition to clean energy after it has secured widespread economic prosperity. In this mindset, poverty is quite literally the greatest vulnerability to climate change. Number 4, India's 8 core missions, the how of systemic implementation. Now, don't just look at this as some dry government checklist. Think of these core missions as interconnected gears working together to safeguard an entire nation. In energy, you've got the huge push of the solar mission paired right alongside strict demand management for energy efficiency. Ecologically, there are specific missions targeting the super fragile Himalayan environment and driving afforestation. And then, absolutely critical for human survival, the water and agriculture missions are all about completely redesigning resource distribution to adapt to unprecedented extreme climate risks. Rounding out the 8, we have 2 foundational pillars. One focuses entirely on mapping scientific data and knowledge resources, and the other tackles the harsh realities of sustainable habitats. Think urban planning, waste, and public transport. Now, the hidden challenge here is avoiding bureaucratic silos when you're coordinating across all these different sectors. But together they form a comprehensive, bottom-up approach to national climate resilience. Number 5, grassroots impact and resilience, social and economic outcomes. Policy really only matters if it changes reality on the ground, right? Well, the transformation happening here is profound, and it's built around a concept called delinking growth. The main objective is to prove that a nation can rapidly grow its local rural economies, pulling millions upward without being totally chained to massive spikes in carbon emissions. It's about creating wealth, for sure, but without creating equal amounts of pollution. And these specific rural initiatives you see here, they are literally the front line of adaptation. Whether we're talking about rural self-employment programs, building out comprehensive road networks, or accelerating water supply schemes, these are not just your standard economic programs. They are essentially climate defense systems. They ensure that vulnerable populations have the baseline economic stability and the infrastructure they need to not just survive, but withstand severe climate shocks when they inevitably hit.
But it's not all about pouring concrete for seawalls, right? This connects to a much larger global trend, acknowledging that climate resilience is deeply tied to protecting the mental health and the social fabric of affected communities. This strategy explicitly bakes in psychosocial support. It's addressing the sheer trauma from climate disasters, providing critical safety nets to prevent child exploitation during forced migrations, and even establishing conflict resolution programs for when resources start to run scarce.
Number 6, strategic recap and analysis, exam mastery session. Okay, let's lock in everything we've analyzed today with a rapid-fire recap. These are your must-remember facts. 1, the shift to adaptation is all about immediate, local survival. 2, economic growth is not the enemy of climate action. It is the primary defense mechanism. 3, the policy firmly insists that wealthy nations absolutely must lead global mitigation. 4, the 8 core missions provide a systemic, bottom-up approach. And 5, grassroots programs are actively trying to de-link economic prosperity from carbon emissions. I'm going to leave you with this provocative exam-style question to really test your analytical thinking. If India successfully delinks its economic growth from energy sector emissions, how will that specific model disrupt the traditional development pathways of other developing nations worldwide? Think about that. I encourage you to explore this complex global dynamic further on your own. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those tough questions, and I'll catch you next time.